Hey guys, I hope you are doing well wherever you are. And today I am going to do what I think is the final figure painting. Trilogies seem to work, so we'll call this a three-part series of sort of relaxed woman having deep thoughts, kind of catching a subject in a moment of repose and deep thought. Really love these. It's been a fun series, and I think we'll call this part 3 of 3, and I'll let these be for a little while, but I hope you've enjoyed these, and I hope you've tried some yourself and had some success. Similar formula though. We're gonna have a woman in about the most relaxed pose I can possibly come up with. I want her to seem like all of her weight is just sort of resting on something else. Extreme relaxation. And we do that to make the whole thing into kind of a blank slate. I actually want her to just be as neutral as possible. I don't want there to be any kind of action or implied action. I don't even want her weight to be kind of leaning to one side or have it look like she's carrying herself with one part of her body more than the other. Because all of those things communicate something. They give her personality or a posture that implies some kind of feeling or motive. If we make her look aggressive or shy, if we have her kind of recoiling away from something or aggressively heading towards something, all of that communicates volumes to our viewers. So the more neutral that I can make it, the more I can make it pretty much have the pose communicate nothing. That brings us to that really fun blank slate territory, where if we can make it as neutral as possible in that regard, it lets our viewer kind of step inside and complete the story in their own minds. That kind of lead them up to a story, but don't spoon feed it to them. I love that approach. I find it really powerful and engaging. It kind of draws the viewer in and lets them sort of finish things. It's also just a really nice relieving break from all of the concept art and design work that I do professionally, because it's that stuff you really do need to be pretty overt and describe everything. Now, that suggestion technique where we let the viewer finish the story in their own mind, definitely still a huge part of successful concept art. But for these, I am truly like taking it down to 0. Just a woman in a relaxed pose. It lets us do some really cool skin tone rendering, some nice forms with values. I'm going to have a formal dress once again to kind of give it some contrast, to have drapery to pop against the skin tones, and it's going to look really cool. But for the most part, just blanking things so that we can let the story kind of show up. I've really enjoyed the comments on the last few videos like these. People have sort of told me what they think might be going on in there, even though you know that I specifically don't really have anything intended, and you just kind of told me how the final struck you. I appreciate that. I'm just carving out some forms here. Just like I've said in the past few, really any video where I do a value rendering, the most important thing we can do is control our value edges and our value range. I get a lot of questions about my brush settings. Nothing really magic or secret happening there. In fact, I think I paint pretty much this entire painting with the standard round brush. And I'm not saying that just to sound cool or, look what I can do. I could paint the Sistine Chapel with a paint roller or something like that. I mention that because I think the technique that you use is way more important than the brush. I think keeping your flow and your opacity really low and very slowly building up tones. Control is the whole name of the game. controlling both how bright the values are, but also the edges. Do we have soft, airbrushy gradients and those hard cuts? I think that's the single biggest fundamental game-changing concept that makes organic painting really come to life. So monsters, creatures, and people is control. All of my favorite, like, legendary industry rock star concept artists are absolute masters of this. And it was weirdly a concept that sort of eluded me for years. I think of value as simply light and dark. That seemed to be kind of the end of it to me. But there's a lot more to it than that. And the more we can control these subtleties, the more we can start to actually see these things in the subjects that we reference or the art that inspires us. It all starts to kind of crystallize. It becomes something that you really notice and that you can use in your own work. Coming back to pose a little bit, doing something a little bit different here. Rather than having our figure on a chair or a sofa, doing something a little different here. She's in a bathtub, but she will still be in a formal dress, and I'll put jewelry on her. It's like she is at or just returning from some kind of event. It's a fun moment that I am catching these subjects in these past ones. I like it. It implies a story, something that is about to happen or something that did happen. Kind of that aftermath. There's just a lot of implication there that your viewer can latch on to. The title of this one, the whole goal that I'm going for, is figure paintings that resonate, that kind of catch your viewer's eye and have some kind of a lasting impression. It means something to them. Now, every piece of art that we create is not going to bring someone to tears. I have no delusion that anybody is seeing any of my artwork and just, pausing and slapping their jaw, just saying, my God, it's beautiful, and it means all of these incredibly deep things. Not the case. I think all that we really want to do is make some kind of a connection, have it mean something to someone, and it's successful. If nothing else, just kind of creating a cool little moment for someone to enjoy. For this one, at least at this point in my career, I have the luxury of being able to do these things for myself more often than I used to be able to. And this is kind of what is fun and meaningful for me. These, just figuring these forms out, describing skin tones, that moment where brush marks kind of intersect with starting to look real, but actually kind of messing with that relationship a little bit. Not trying to take it to photorealism, but actually let it stay as smudgy brush marks. I love that tension between those two things. And again, that's something that my favorite concept artists, my favorite digital painters, that's something they have mastered, is playing in that gray zone where brush marks and realism kind of vibrate against each other. I love that. And definitely what I'm trying to do here, all kind of within the framework of this, the human form, a beautiful woman, the most time-honored and awesome subject that there is in art is people, personalities, stories. It's just something that absolutely everyone can relate to. So it's a fun challenge to explore. I've gone into quite a good bit of depth on why painting people is so hard and why it's so worthwhile, but it kind of always bears repeating. It's just something that everybody on Earth can instantly spot when something is a little bit off. Even at this point in the painting, there's a laundry list of things that I am kind of yelling at myself to fix. Even as I'm kind of watching it unfold again to do the commentary, there's things that I know I'm going to fix later that are just bugging me right now. And I'm sure that that's the case with my viewers too. When you see a painting, if something's not right, it just jumps out at you. We're also hardwired to engage with people, to kind of know the human form, that it really jumps out. So it's kind of a low margin for error. But at the same time, that's what makes it so cool, is that when it works, when you kind of cross that threshold into letting it just be accepted as a plausible human, it's really kind of magic. That moment when it starts to work really is great. So that's always the challenge, to see if I can approach or even cross that line where it just kind of reaches this like, okay, I accept this. And that's a hard thing to do. That's something it's a struggle I will be lovingly engaged with for the rest of my life, is trying to hit that mark. But that's kind of the fun of this. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I look at one of these a year later and just realize that some proportion or some form modeling, some little bit of rendering is way off. Facial expressions are often the culprit there. There's such a fine line between somebody looking neutral to looking, disdainful or hateful, weirdly. The slightest little manipulation to the corners of the mouth or parts of the cheeks that carry a lot of your expressiveness, those things have a huge impact. So this is hard. People are complicated, but that's what makes it awesome. Working on some skin tones here. After my initial value rendering, I have sort of been going light and dark a lot. So one of the first things I do once I have that orange value painting finished is a long evening out process where I'm bringing things back to a middle range. Not quite so zebra striped, where we go from very bright lights to, all the way down to my base dark silhouette. And that has this really nice evening out effect. The skin tones become really smooth and subtle. We're controlling that value range. I imagine the whole spectrum of value with white on one side and black on the other. And then I try and imagine a really small range in the middle, kind of like put a bracket on either side of your light and dark range, and don't go outside of that. Just let the skin tones kind of exist within that limited range, and it tends to work. It lets us get all of this nice subtle form modeling. It's what makes her leg here look round and kind of cylindrical. Makes it look like those forms are kind of curving away as they go over that horizon of her leg. So it makes these things feel three-dimensional. It makes it seem like there are actually muscles underneath the skin. Every little lump and place where body parts kind of join together, it all has to sort of imply all of the complexity and beauty of the body. Really cool stuff, and it's an incredibly subtle space to work within, especially when we do follow that nice limited value range approach. It's like we have a limited number of tools, a limited space to work within, and we have to do a lot of communicating with that. We have to check all of these boxes. The human anatomy box, we have to make it look like realistic skin tones. All of that stuff has to just work. So it's looking like her lower body is a little bit detached from her upper body, so I'm adjusting that a little bit. I have not done much traditional figure painting in my life. I think I may have painted an oil self-portrait in college quite a while back, and that was maybe the only painting I ever did. I did quite a bit of charcoal figure drawing, which I actually enjoyed quite a lot. Ever since then, I have been purely a digital painter. Figure painting, concept art, character design, it's been all digital for me. And that kind of changed everything. I think it's a great advantage that artists learning art today have, is that they can kind of jump straight to that. That was not a popular school of thought when digital art kind of first became the industry standard. A lot of people thought that you absolutely had to be traditionally trained first, and then you could try and transition into digital art. I sort of came into my professional phase of my art life in the middle of that, where maybe the schools of thought were changing a little bit. Nowadays, I think it's very acceptable to have never gotten your hands dirty with oil paint or charcoal and to jump straight into digital painting, to just pick up Photoshop or Procreate as an art beginner and just start there. I think the reason that probably changed is, one, because the established industry just didn't really want to let go of the older tools. They wanted to just say, no, airbrushing, oil painting, this is how professional art is made, and it always will be, period. And I also just think there's always resistance to new technology. Whenever a new way of doing something gets created, it scares us. It makes us feel weird. Like I sort of liked the industry just fine before this new thing came along, and I don't like this. I don't want to learn something new. I think that's really natural. Obviously, there is a huge example of this exact concept happening at this very moment in art, which is AI art. I want to do a video devoted to that because I've gotten a lot of questions about it, and I definitely have some opinions, but I am playing with the software myself. I want to make sure I have a really informed opinion before I dive into that, but not to get too off topic there. Digital art is amazing. It lets artists take risks. You're never afraid of screwing something up or ruining a promising piece of art, because you can always hit undo or just save it on a layer, or change things. It's infinitely reworkable. There is no paint mark I can make on this canvas that I can't cover up, erase, or get rid of. There's no way for me to stain the canvas permanently. Everything's forgivable. It's that digital safety net. And that lets artists be adventurous. You can take risks. You can try something. You can save it on a layer and just turn the whole thing bright pink if you want to. It lets us proceed and experiment without fear. And I think that fear of just trashing something that you were really getting excited about, that paralyzing feeling, I think has held artists back probably since forever. I've got a feeling just about everybody watching this video, if you are coming to check out an art channel or interested in concept art or figure painting, I guarantee you have felt that. I guarantee you have probably screwed up your share of promising images too. I certainly have, but it just doesn't happen anymore with digital painting. There are exceptions, obviously. I've messed files up before, but for the most part, if you just save and, of course, back stuff up occasionally, you're going to be fine. So try anything. Go nuts. Experiment. Kind of stretch out of your comfort zone and you grow faster than artists have at any point in history, which is kind of amazing. We are lucky. This is like a golden age for artists, in my opinion. And to prove that, I don't think you have to go any farther than Pinterest or ArtStation. There is enough art in those places to blow your mind every day for the rest of your life. This is kind of maybe not such a hot take, but I get more inspired on ArtStation than every museum I have ever been into in my entire life. I just find more stuff to make me say, wow, that is cool, than any museum. Maybe that's just sort of my preference. This is like the exact kind of art that I am into. But I think part of it is just that we live in such an unchained, free to pursue art at its highest levels of mastery type of environment that so many artists are taking advantage of with digital art. There are just so many things you can experiment with, so many ways to stretch your craft. And artists all over the world all the time are just kind of taking that to new heights. It's really awesome. You don't have to be this once-in-a-generation master to really create amazing, cool results with digital art. I think that's awesome. And it just lets artists develop quickly. It lets you find new ways to do things, lets you reach higher levels faster, which is great. Kind of lowering that bar of entry into professional art is something that I have kind of tried to make sort of a mission. It's what Digital Painting Studio is all about, and that's why digital is in the title. Cool. So we're getting kind of into the home stretch for this one, and here comes the dress and the jewelry, just to sort of nudge the story in a certain direction. Again, clothing, style, hair, all of these things just speak volumes. It's like the pose, the skin tones, the facial expression. There's sort of this blank canvas, but the clothing, the style choices that I'm making here, that's like the small amount of actual overt storytelling that I'm allowing myself. And it ends up being a really nice bit of contrast between these two surface types that we're showing, skin and cloth, and a little bit of sparkly metal to make it all look cool. With drapery, and actually kind of like skin tones, I think the goal should be the fewest number of brush strokes possible. I really love choppy, very expressive, and very deliberate brush strokes for drapery and skin tones. So I'm trying something a little bit different to make it look like this very kind of rigid fabric. I'm really fashion uneducated, so I'm not sure what fabric type it is. Maybe silk, but I can practically feel it, what I have in mind. It's like something that curtains are made out of, and it's just very rigid. So that leads us to these really cool overlapping wrinkles that essentially make all of these triangle shapes. It's like it's faceted. They're polygons, either facing up towards the light source or away. It also gives me this nice opportunity to lead the eye with all of these implied lines. A huge design principle is how we can kind of point our viewers' attention in a certain direction. And I've picked up some really awesome tricks for that over the years, and this is definitely a good one, when we can use implied lines to direct the viewer's attention. Really dramatic and cool, and just the contrast is nice, kind of switching from very smooth kind of form modeling edge control with the skin tones to something sort of different. Just all of these really choppy polygon shapes describing the fabric of the dress. Very cool. And as always, I never want anything to feel too much like a digital tool. So those selection tool shapes felt very much like just I was actually using that lasso to create a triangle and filling it. I don't want it to look like that. I want it to always come back to a place of feeling like a brush did it. So every little smudgy line describing her hair, or all the ways the skin tone kind of has all these brushy marks around it. I want all of that to feel painterly, to have that hand of the artist sort of craft to it. I always want people to kind of imagine an artist made this rather than a digital tool. Here's my favorite part. It's edge lights. It's almost like the entire painting is just a setup for this. This is the payoff for me. It's where I just add a secondary light source. We kind of have our main ambient light that's illuminating her entire body up to this point, but this is where we make it seem like she's looking out a window, or like there's some kind of a light shining on her. It's cool when it's coming from the direction of her attention too. It's like she's looking at wherever this light source is coming from. Weirdly, little design decisions like that have a huge impact on how the story ends up feeling. It's like she's looking out at the sunrise or something, imagining her day ahead. Or it could be the opposite, looking at the sun go down, sort of contemplating the day's events and whatever the hell led her to get into this bathtub in a formal dress. All that cool like perfume ad in a magazine drama that we can create just with a relaxed pose and some kind of fanciness. It's fun. But these are so incredible, super cinematic. They just make it look like she is, in a photography studio. It's that photography lighting scheme where we have a key light and then an edge light to kind of cut the silhouette of the figure out of the rest of the scene. But it's also just beautiful. It's kind of instant cinematic drama, and I love that, especially kind of putting some little detail into the hair. This is one place where I actually do like to do some kind of very small, fine brush work to describe individual hairs or tiny little details. The edge lights are the place for that. Really expressive and really dramatic, and just really helps it feel more three-dimensional. We're kind of rounding these forms out. It looks very much like her arm and her face do kind of curve around to that side that we can't see. It completes that three-dimensional point that we want to use, and all just by creating some shapes, kind of thin line, thick line, make certain things look like they're overlapping, sort of buff out certain edges so that it looks like it's fading away, doing some value edge control. It's all just really compelling. But with that, I think we are just about to a finished painting. I've added some glows, a little bit of background detail, kind of finished the whole bathtub story, but I really love this one. This has been a super fun series, and I appreciate all of the comments and interactions. I hope you guys have liked this too. But now I am in the fun spot of deciding what I would like to paint next. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. In the meantime, good luck with your artwork. Paint something cool today.